Hi, if you've ever wondered why those dinos look like they've got BBLs, stay tuned. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to look at a very short-lived franchise, as well as the two, and a half female members of this cast who, as a whole, did not really, see a lot of success back in the 80s. Although, the line would find some surprising success elsewhere and further in the future. So let's just get right into Dinosaucers, Princess Day and Teryx. The story of Dinosaucers really kind of starts on the planet Reptilon, which is very much a mirror image of Earth, except that the dinosaurs had continued to evolve. In Reptilon, they sort of splintered off into two main warring factions, the Tyrannos and the Dinosaucers. The Dinosaucers, of course, would have essentially flying saucers that very much, resembled what species they were, which, frankly, as a narcissist like myself or, say, Hordak, I can appreciate. They find themselves rekindling their war on Earth. The Dinosaucers, of course, team up with a band of little teenage kids. If you know me, you know I'm not a fan of these guys, but, nevertheless, four sassy teens called the Secret Scouts, who were also given rings by the Dinosaucers to boost their own powers in this fight for survival. All of that would have been enough premise, but this was the late 80s. This was around 1987 when this cartoon came out, so we're in the era of visionaries, ringleaders, just piling on concepts and seeing what sticks. So the Dinosaucers specifically could de-evolve into their more, primal form that you would find here on Earth millions of years ago. By doing so, they would maintain their intelligence. However, the Tyrannos could not do this and had to use some special ray gun to do that, but were, not as intelligent, and it's just, in theory, it could have been a great way to sell more toys, but in practice, that did not happen. Dinosaucers had a bit of a reverse Bravestar thing happening here, where with Bravestar, the toys came out well in advance of the cartoon. Dinosaucers is a bit of the reverse. So, despite being considered a failure, they did pump out a full season of 65 episodes. That said, the launch of a toy line took a little longer. Initially, Hasbro was going to make the toys for Dinosaucers. That said, and because we all know where we're here, this was Hasbro in the late 80s, so, the female figures were never on the table, so that's just, that's that. Also, Hasbro sort of went a little more edgelord with the designs, and, Michael Uslan was not happy with this direction, so he kind of shut that down, and they decided to go back to market for toys. This was a bit of a problem in the sense there was a lot of wasted time in the meantime. The toys would eventually go to Gloob, who I don't really talk about a lot on this channel, and I have no real strong feelings for, but nevertheless, they were not also going to make the female figures for this line. Nevertheless, the toys do look really great. At least they would have been. They had the saucers, they had playsets, they had really fun, chunky, big toys of the dinosaurs. Unfortunately, the cartoon did not do well, and the toys had taken so long to develop and so long to put to market that, everyone just had a big panicked Suki attack and canceled the whole thing. Back to the reason for the season, I usually talk about the female characters and figures a little, up top, before the, verdict on what happened to the toy line, but, I wanted to let this breathe, because these characters really kind of grew on me, despite this show not being anything that I am super interested in. The first, and I would say, the main character, the main event, would be Teryx. She was really the main female character for the series. The rest are, let's say, more side characters. Teryx was an Archaeopteryx, and bear in mind, I'm not good with dino names. She was really, especially at that time, sort of considered the first bird dino. So she was a little different than the rest, and she was a great counterpart, or counterpoint rather, to Pterodactyl on the villain side as the sort of flying scout kind of creature. She was a little different than the most of her cohorts amongst 80s women. I mean, a lot of them at the time were very harsh, sardonic, like, leave this to me, boys. But Teryx was really, sort of just one of the team. She, had fun with the rest of them. She Was not necessarily the the mechanically based Donatello type, but she dabbled in building stuff. So really terribly well rounded. I was really quite impressed and really kind of like charmed by her, despite the fact that this whole franchise is not necessarily for me. All that said, because she was the girl character and really the only one, she was, of course, had a lot of attention piled upon her about who she was going to mate with, I guess. So Genghis Rex had a crush on her back on their home planet. Apparently, she was essentially a soap star actress, which. What? She, of course, did not reciprocate because he was the ruler of an evil empire. But she did understand him and did show him a lot of empathy, regardless. All that said, she would use her womanly wiles to get her way with him as well. On the flip side, she did have a crush on Itchy on her own team, but their love was forbidden because she was a flying dinosaur. He was a water dinosaur. Think of the children. But eventually, it's sort of, although unsaid largely, very clear that the two of them had paired off by the season's end. Do I love that she was reduced to a love interest? No. Do I kind of like it anyway? Yes, absolutely. So, whatever. Another, I would say, very important character to the franchise, although not one, terribly, wouldn't make a great figure necessarily, would be Sarah Spencer. Again, I don't love teenage characters or kids that, help adults or, like this is a big trope in a lot of 80s cartoons that never go well. However, I will say they did prove useful. The Secret Scouts, despite their limited age, were there to sort of help the Dinosaucers acclimate to Earth, something that gave them an edge over their enemies. So, and at the very least too, they had special rings that the Dinosaucers gave them that would sort of elevate their power set and not make them look like such just useless hostage bait. The other character of note is Princess Day, who is very much a side character, very much made for the show. Nevertheless, she was a female dinosaur, and I like her look and I like her character because she is that bitch, so I've included her here. Day was a Deinonychus, maybe? Very much sort of in the raptor-ish family, let's say. She was the older sister for the main villain, Genghis Rex. The villains in the show were a little comedic. It wasn't so much like the kind of like, ride or die, dire stakes, Dino Riders kind of thing. The villains were much more kind of bumbling. Day really kind of brought that back to square one, where she was the older sister. She was, in charge seemingly of the forces back on their home planet. Again, just that bitch. I mean, she came in and just ripped everyone a new one. Very few appearances, made a big splash. Big fan of her. Now that we sort of covered the women of the line, it's sort of a bit important to kind of bring this back to the failure to start of the toy line and its cancellation. So often when the women are excluded from a toy line, I kind of cry foul and sexism. In the case of Hasbro's first attempt, absolutely. Galoob, I don't really have a good grasp on sort of what their take was, particularly in the 1980s. All that said, probably that route, but I will put on a little caveat that originally Teryx was going to be a male character and was sort of changed at the 11th hour going into the cartoon. So, in theory, for devil's advocate's sake, that could have delayed the development of that character in a toy line. That said, because there was such a long distance between the development of the cartoon to Galoob getting the license, I mean, this is probably a non-issue. I bring it up for the case of fairness and for, a bit of trivia, but I think this was simply exclusion. As for Sarah and Princess Day, I mean, they were, let's just call it side characters. They were never really planned for it. They were never really even, part of the master toy, strategy. So it's unfortunate they were never included, but Dinosaucers may not be, one of the big hallmark brands of the 80s, but they've really taken on a different life of their own. Very much different than a lot of the toy lines I've covered here so far. So, Galoob, perhaps a little miffed that they put in all this development only to have the whole line canceled, decided to regroup their losses, and they sold the molds to Brazilian toy distributor Glass Latte. They took the molds and created, of the 8 characters planned, 5 and put those to market. As I understand it, they really gave it the royal treatment. I mean, they had the same kind of displays and pomp that, say, Ninja Turtles would have had at the same time. So, I mean, there really was a push for them. And, if you've been paying attention to, Brazilian Comic-Cons, or, how DC pushes so hard in that market. I mean, Brazil is a tastemaker. So the toys there, did flourish pretty well. That said, they do seem to be made of kind of a weird plastic and a hard paint, so of the toys that were made, they did not survive very well. Likewise, they were prohibitively expensive at that time even, so they didn't likewise sell incredibly well. So for you to purchase original Brazilian versions of these Dinosaucers, it's going to cost you, and they're going to be pretty banged up, I can guarantee. Because Teryx wasn't involved in the first, batch of sculpts, she of course wasn't released in Brazil. Again, completely shut out. That said, there is an incredible customizer, and I use that word very lightly. It's really more of kind of a mini distributor of sorts, who has gone back and recreated Dinosaucers action figures. That would be Master Turtle Customs on Instagram. He has been instrumental in making this video. We had quite the long conversation about the history of Dinosaucers and what the pitch looks like. I mean, this guy is the authority on Dinosaurs, but beyond that, the authority on toys. So if you are interested in a good toy of dinosaurs, if this line is your ride or die, he makes very limited runs of the characters. It's best to sort of reach out to him directly, very responsive, but most importantly, especially for this series, he's created all of the characters, including the Secret Scouts, Princess Day, and, of course, Teryx. I didn't expect to talk this long about Dinosaurs, but, it's a line that I feel as if I were a little bit younger when it came out, I probably would have really responded well to it. If I was in that dinosaur space, kind of loving, area of my life, probably around 6 or 7, this might be a different story. This might actually be something I really latched on to. Unfortunately, I was sort of older and wiser at that point. Nevertheless, I can see people of a very specific age really latching onto this. And if you want, if you're a purist and want the, the originals, it'll cost you. But I mean, that said, there's a great avenue within the fan community, and I think that's where I generally like to encourage people to go. Support your local artists who are not only incredibly friendly, knowledgeable, but make great toys. So I'll link, his Instagram in the description below. And that's about it for me with Dinosaucers. Again, love Teryx, love dinosaurs, love Pink. Big fan of these characters, regardless of the franchise itself, flying below my radar. But thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all those YouTube things. And I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.